I don't think photography is a didactic medium. I see it more as a series of impressions or construct about my personal projects. I want to see them as open structure and to allow some liberty to readers to draw their own conclusions about it. I think that Islamic countries or Muslim world, there's a huge number of stories that are either untold or told in a superficial way. Coming from Muslim background and a country that has a significant Muslim community, I just wanted to try to offer a different perspective. Photography for me was a hobby. I have no academic background in photography whatsoever. I was studying comparative literature. That's my kind of formal education. I want to tell stories. Here you're using words, in the other place you're using pictures, but it's basically, it's the same thing. During the war years in Bosnia, I was a teenager, I was 15. And I wasn't really able to take part in what was happening in the events that were unfolding around me, because I was too young to fight and I was too young to be a photographer, except of being subject of those events, which means basically a target, like every other citizen. That was kind of a frustration. When I started working seriously, I was focused on what was on aftermath of the war in Bosnia. Huge part of it is compensation, maybe even recreation of the excitement and adrenaline rushes that I was experiencing as a kid. And as I was kind of completing that body of work, I realized that there is a number of places around the world that have been following similar pattern of ethnic violence, fraternal wars. A lot of these places share one more thing in common, which is significant Muslim population. So I got interested in that because I think photography, for me, it's all about empathy. My previous experience actually allows me to do that. And that's how the project Troubled Islam developed, from working in Bosnia to all the countries all the way to Pakistan. It's from Pakistan. The family with the things that they saved when they were fleeing the Western province. Then, this is one of my favorites. It's Kabul Cemetery. I don't know, it's oxymoron in itself. I just wanted to make a comparison between these countries. And one of the comparisons was obviously just to see how people cope with and how they manage to preserve the traces of normality despite all the odds that are against them. Comparative method is not necessarily a very fruitful method to make conclusions. I think with images, it's very fruitful. I mean, if you put things together, the reader can kind of make a decision and make conclusions on their own. And this is the brand new book that hasn't been distributed yet. And it's I think it's a special project. So I wanted to make something where my interference as a photographer, as a human being, will be minimized. And I also wanted to make actually a project that my subjects might benefit from. And the project culminated in a publication called Quest for Identity. About 8 years ago, I was working on a group project, and as part of that story, I went to this facility in central Bosnia, which handles the whole identification process of missing people in Bosnia, which is roughly 40,000 people have been missing, killed. They have database of DNA and so on and so forth. But among other things, they also have storage of archived, cataloged items, personal belongings that have been recovered along the human remains. what it happens, they invite families and they browse through, these items. This horrible process. And I said, well, wait a minute, wouldn't it be better if these people actually recognize these items on the paper instead of actually physically have to go to these facilities and browse? So that's the project. So I decided to photograph these items in exactly the same way on a forensic table on which the bodies are assembled, and to photograph them in a very clinical, very detached way, and to create this book and iPad app and online catalog of these items, which will correspond with the physical archive. It's amazing how absolute detachment in form can actually create extremely emotional body of work. Everyone has wristwatch, everyone has family pictures in a wallet. It allows you as a reader to create a story around. 20 magazines published that across the globe, from Spain to Holland to States. And, the project was supported by so many people and so many organizations. So I think that's probably the best thing, and well, not best, but the most important thing I've ever done. I have an assignment from the Sunday Times magazine, which regularly hires me or runs my work, and so they gave me commission for this particular story. We're flying to Riyadh in a few hours, where we'll spend 10 days to shoot a story on Saudi Arabia women. So I'm going to do photos and I'm going to shoot video interviews. I traveled on several occasions to Saudi Arabia to do different stories. It's a place that it's actually rarely reported from, considering that it's pretty difficult to get access to the country itself. And every time someone speaks about Saudi Arabia, that's what they speak about. Women's rights to drive, to work. So it's a good place to challenge the stereotype. So we came to Saudi Arabia in Riyadh, the capital. Riyadh is a weird city, I would say. It's kind of heartland of the royal family, which is kind of plateau in the middle of the country. I wouldn't call it a beautiful city because, there's nothing actually to resemble the fact that this is one of the oldest inhabited places on earth. Basically, all the traces of old cultures and civilizations are kind of wiped out. And instead of that, you just have this eclectic architecture which combines super modern American architecture with some Bedouin kind of tent style roofs and so on and so forth. So a lot of glass, a lot of metal. Riyadh is kind of a place where everything takes place in the private places, either behind the walls of the houses or in the shopping malls, close quarters, so to speak. It's because of the heat and because of this obsessive need for privacy. So nothing really happens in the streets. And to make things even more complicated, Saudi society is fairly segregated. I wouldn't call it extreme, but here is more visible. Talking to women in general, it's not the easiest thing to do. And especially when it comes to talking to camera or taking pictures that are going to be published abroad. It's a traditional culture, it's sensitive. So, as usual, I rely on local knowledge and local connections. Good?
Yeah, absolutely. Ready. Rock and roll.
Because, no matter how many times you travel to a certain place, your knowledge of culture and how things work is fairly limited. We hired a local production company. They have a lot of experience in dealing with people. I made specifically kind of demands of what kind of women I would like to meet. The local production company basically sorted it all out.
Ladies. That's what I do for a living now, fixing ladies.
I think there's a general feeling that Muslim women in general and Saudi women in particular is somehow put in the back seat of the society. The picture is very fragmented and largely inaccurate. So I'd like to get kind of a cross-section of Saudi women and to try to photograph them and interview them in either their private spaces or their working space. That way?
In Saudi Arabia, when we go out, we wear abaya. Abaya, it's different from region to region. Here in Riyadh, okay, we wear mainly black. For every occasion, we do have different kind of abaya. Fashion designer, they would have a business only to sell abaya, and women, they of course like, oh, I'm wearing this designer, I'm wearing that. So yes, abaya, it's part of the fashion now. My name is Buthaina Zakaria Murshid. I had my doctorate from Yale University in Management of Chronic Illness, which is subspecialty from doctoral in clinical research.
Whenever we're talking about Muslim women, Saudi Arabia is always picked up as a bad example. But actually, statistically, women in Saudi Arabia are more educated than men. There are more women with college degrees or MAs, MBAs, and PhDs than men. If the issue that we are dealing with is that Muslim woman is underrepresented in the media, then I want to dedicate, my attention to her. Can you a little bit that way? Just yeah, perfect. That's why portraits seemed like appropriate way to do it. I wanted to give certain formal values to the picture, so I'd like to be accurately composed. After all these years of being a photographer, I don't get easily surprised, but what keeps surprising me every single time I get out in the field and photograph is that how people are willing to allow photographers enter their private space. I think that's pretty amazing in any country, and also in a country like Saudi Arabia, where everything is so private anyways. Somehow there's this implied trust between the subject and the photographer.
So you have a cupcake store?
It's not ours. We're only opening the franchise. But the original is in Dammam. It was founded by a female, Saudi female. It was very successful. It's all cupcakes. And they cover it all with the cream, the green cream. About the Saudi women in general, a lot of people think they're pampered. But the truth is, no, they're very active, but behind the scenes. They're mothers, they're housewives, they work, they study at the same time, full job. Also, they're starting their own business. Recently, I can see they're achieving a lot.
On the other hand, yeah, they're beautiful women. That's also another thing that we are not aware, because most of the images you see are the images from the street where they are obliged to cover either part of their body or most of their body and face. This was more controlled environment, but that way, where I would choose which part of the room or house plays the person the way I would like. What I wanted to create is this kind of simple environmental portraits. And the context, in this case environment and private spaces, actually tell much more than just the figure or the face of the person. Story about Islam is a relevant one, globally. I think it's been widely inaccurately represented in the media, that is trying to be presented as a conflict between East and West, between Christianity and Islam. And I think that's really dangerous. So it's on us to, shift that image.
السعودية متطورة ومماشية على متغيرات العصر. مع الأسف النظرة اللي هناك ما كانت تنظر للسعودية بهذا النظرة، فهم لو جو السعودية وشافوا حيغيروا نظرتهم اللي عن السعودية.
Oh wow. Jesus.
فالمرأة السعودية النظرة للعالم إنه بما إنها بتغطي ومتحجبة إنها حقوقها مهضومة وضعيفة وتنقاد للرجل. بالعكس، المرأة السعودية هي امرأة إن ما تكون زي بقية النساء فهي أقوى منهم، لأنها يعني كافحت عشان توصل لما وصلت إليه. في عصر المرأة الزاهر والذهبي، في عصر الملك عبد الله، أعاد لها هذه الحقوق وابتدت تاخذ حقوقها. والمرأة السعودية مو مجرد إنها غطاء إنه الغطاء هذا أو الحجاب اللي هي بتستخدمه يحجب عقلها.
All of the women we met, they all work and they all have college degrees. And equally so, I'm sure there's a bunch of women who are not educated and are out of work. But I'm just talking about what I've seen. And obviously we've seen only a small fraction of it, so I'm not claiming that we have the whole picture. But I think it's important to do stories that are showing at least slightly a different side of the coin. Yeah. Nice to meet you. How are you? Nice to meet you. With photographers, somehow a lot of us try to please the stereotypes. We put the blame on like, yeah, that's what the media wants. That's what the people want to see. I mean, how do we know what people want to see? I can only be kind of listen to the common sense. If I was the reader, what I would like to read. So, I mean, this is what I would like to read. So I do the stories that I would like to see someone else does.